This is where I serve, and this is where I serve. This is where I serve, and this is where I serve. When I tell people where I serve, I usually tell them that I serve in a town of 83 people on the border between Nebraska and Kansas, and that I don't live in town. In fact, when my 5-member family moved to the parsonage of St. Peter, which is the church out in the country, we doubled the population of our square mile. My name is Pastor Breen Sipes, and for the past 7 years, I have been the solo pastor of Tri-Saints Lutheran Parish in Byron and Hardy, Nebraska. They are a 3-congregation partnership that has worked together as sisters in ministry and mission since the 1990s. On Sunday mornings, we have 1 worship service in Hardy with a single congregation, and 1 worship service in Byron with both Byron congregations, and the location of worship rotates monthly. There are 210 active members in the entire parish, approximately 50 of which are 8th grade or younger, and 17 of which are currently a part of our confirmation program. Those are great odds. Most of the people that I serve work either as farmers or as those who support the agricultural industry. They have survived and thrived through population decline, an uncertain farming economy tracing all the way back to the Dust Bowl, and the mechanization of agriculture, which means that it takes fewer people to farm more acres, and that you must farm more acres in order to make a living. We also have teachers, healthcare workers, and business owners. They are a well-educated, hard-working, risk-tolerant people, many of whom can trace their family roots back to the land from the Homestead Act in 1865. The Bible story with which they most identify is the story of Jesus' ascension in Acts 1, when he tells the disciples that they will be his witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Because they feel like, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, they live at the ends of the earth. And because they are a vibrant parish, they are fulfilling Jesus' mission by bringing the good news of the gospel right where they live. Mission accomplished. As their pastor, the Bible story with which most resonates with me is the walk to the Emmaus at the end of the Gospel of Luke. I am originally from Normandale Lutheran Church in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, a large suburban church with multiple full-time paid clergy and staff. I have served churches in large towns, cities, and small towns, and rural Nebraska is not a context in which I was raised, though I have absolutely grown to love it. Because I am not a native, and really never will be, I am called instead to work alongside the Tri-Saints on their faith journey, to open their minds to the scriptures, and to accompany them on their way. I begin with context, because when I think of the work of faith formation here in the kingdom of God, I cannot think about it as separate from a context. Deeply understanding your context is key in determining a course for faith formation that will catch hold where you live. Although I can and will give you some useful tools for discovering and leveraging the unexpected assets in your context, that work will only be fruitful if you understand the context itself. Take a couple of minutes with your journal or your piece of paper and your pencil to consider these questions. What is your context? What's the who, what, where, and how of the place that you serve? You will hear this sound when it's time to conclude your ponderings. Go ahead. Now, let's dive into the framework that I use to apply faith formation principles in each context. As I thought about what I might have to say about faith formation at the ends of the earth, a scene from the movie The Princess Bride came to mind. There's a point in the movie where Inigo Montoya and the giant have rescued the man in black from the six-fingered man and taken him to Miracle Max to be healed. Now it is time to storm the castle, rescue the princess, slaughter the six-fingered man, and ride off into the sunset. The man in black asks, "What are our liabilities?" And Inigo replies, "There is but a single castle gate, and it is guarded by 60 men." The man in black asks, "What are our assets?" And Inigo replies, "Your brains, his strength, and my steel." Brains, strength, and steel. Many larger, less rural churches have more traditional assets, don't they? They have the brains, strength, and steel of multiple professional leaders, larger budgets, and more volunteers to pull off what we traditionally think of as successful programs. And sometimes, small churches, rural churches, look at other places and other churches and think, we don't have what they have, so we really can't do anything. And to a certain extent, that can be true. There are 15,000 people total in the entire 3-county area which my parish serves, and we have been in population decline since 1910. The closest Walmart and McDonald's is 45 minutes away. The closest Starbucks is 70 miles. We struggle with leadership at church because oftentimes everyone is already serving multiple leadership roles within our community. We struggle with time because it takes so long to get places, and many of the places we have to get to do our jobs and give our children more opportunities are far away. I have been reading about the decline in mainline denominations and in Christianity in North America in general, and I imagine that no matter what your specific context, a feeling of scarcity is starting to creep in. I wonder if one of the great gifts that small and rural churches in this time and place have to give those who are just starting to experience decline is their over 100 years of experience of doing ministry at the ends of the earth. It is my experience that no matter where we serve, there is always something we wish we had, some kind of asset that if we only had it would magically make our faith formation strategies work. With that in mind, I now invite you to take 2 minutes to get it out of your system. What are your liabilities? What does your ministry lack? What do you wish you had? Again, you'll hear the ringing of the chimes when it's time to come back. Let's return for a moment to the Princess Bride. When the man in black asks Inigo, "What are our assets?" and Inigo answers, "Your brains, his strength, my steel," the man in black says, "If we only had a wheelbarrow, that would be something." Inigo remembers that they had a wheelbarrow stashed in the woods, and the man in black replies, "Why didn't you list that among our assets in the first place?" In the midst of seeming scarcity, it is not always bad news. In Byron, we have a multi-million-dollar community center with commercial kitchen, library, and fitness center. Unlike many small towns in the area, we still have a post office and bank, a volunteer fire department, beauty shop, gift and clothing store, auto repair shop, electrical repair, cafe, and playground and softball field. Recently, the community acted to save their grocery store, which still delivers groceries to the elderly and shut-in. My children attend an excellent K-12 public school in a community nearby, and the whole community still shows up for town events. We may not have many of the traditional assets, but we do have a long history of ingenuity and making do with what we have. The people I serve are not afraid to do hard work, and they are very tolerant of risk. It makes it a great place to engage in experiments. In rural and small church faith formation, we may not have the expected assets of brains, strength, and steel, but I have found that if you are willing to be creative in your thinking and diligent in prayer, you might just find a wheelbarrow stashed in the woods, waiting to be used. The first experiment that I want to share with you comes from the smallest congregation I serve, St. Paul in Hardy. When I began my ministry with Tri-Saints 7 years ago, St. Paul Hardy had an average worship attendance of around 40. Today, an optimistic count is 20, with a more realistic count of 12 to 15. When I began, they had a small, one-room weekly Sunday school program with 6 children and youth of similar ages. 5 years ago, 2 of those youth entered high school, 2 moved with their family to Wisconsin, and with only 2 left and 1 new baby, we made the hard decision to suspend their faith formation programming for children and youth. It was a difficult moment for them and for me. Though they insisted I continue to deliver children's messages in worship no matter what, because as they told me, we are all children of God and we get as much out of your children's sermons as we do out of your sermon for adults. I'm not sure what that says about the clarity of my preaching. I did work with the one family who had children to give them resources for faith formation at home, and we laid Sunday school to rest. But it still bothered us. Who were we without Sunday school? Were we giving up? Did we have a future? In August of 2016, I was once again thinking about this as I planned programming for the upcoming year, and it came to me truly like a lightning bolt from heaven. The congregation of St. Paul Hardy is small, but they are mighty. They are willing to try just about anything, and their spirit of experimentation is hard to match. And their unexpected asset, their wheelbarrow, they have a heart for working with children. As I looked out at the congregation, I realized that although we did not have many children in worship, they all had children in their lives. They are parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Whenever I brought resources to church that were appropriate for children and youth, they always asked for extra copies to keep at their houses for the next time that the grands or greats stopped by for a visit. They were naturally willing to share their faith with the children and youth in their own lives. And now my task was to connect this passion for children and youth with children and youth who could use some more caring adults in their lives. What are the unexpected assets in your context? Who in your context has a passion for something that is so far untapped? Take a few moments to talk this over, or to think this over. Try not to reach for solutions just yet. Just identifying assets. At St. Paul Hardy, the attendance of our children and youth had once again grown to 6. 2 were old enough to read, 3 were pre-readers, and 1 was just a year old. 3 of them, a 6-year-old and twin 3-year-olds, were my own children, and the other 3 children made up one other family. In order to do vibrant faith formation with them, we would have to think outside of the box. Because of my worship schedule and the coaching schedules of the other parents, we decided that monthly instead of weekly was the way to go. It would have to be after worship and after fellowship time, because as my girls call it, this is the cookie church. And there was no way I was going to ask anyone, children or adults, to skip the cookies. Because our children were so young, we had to be mindful of short attention spans, and our volunteers would not be so willing if it spilled into Sunday dinner time. I could not attend because I lead worship in the Byron congregations at the same time. And since the goal was connecting children and youth with older adults with a passion for working with children, parents were disqualified from being the adults involved. We had an outline for what would come to be called CDT, or Children of God Devotion Time. And now it was time to put it into practice. I began by recruiting 6 lap grandparents. Their job was to be paired with one child and to sit with them, sometimes with the child actually on their lap for the whole of the 20-minute devotion time. As a large group, they prayed a repeat after me prayer, led by one adult or one of 2 reading children. Then they read a story that went with the Sunday's text out of a children's Bible together. Then in pairs, one adult and one child worked through an age-appropriate children's bulletin on the same text. When everyone was finished with that, they prayed another repeat after me prayer, and they were done. The kids loved working with an unrelated older adult, The older adults loved that the prep was done for them and they could focus on one child at a time. And the congregation was happy to see faith formation for children return. But that is not the end of the story. In our family, we had been doing family devotion time on a regular basis for years, and my girls missed doing the craft and song that had accompanied the Bible story. One month, I decided to provide a craft. I explained it to the other mother. She agreed to lead it, and I left to lead worship in Byron. And you know what happened? On that Sunday, we went from having 12 of the 20 people in worship involved in faith formation on a Sunday morning to 18 of the 20. Little known to me was the fact that the lap grandparents that I had recruited were not at all crafty, even when it came to something simple. Instead of giving up, however, they went into the room where the other adults were still having their coffee and recruited 6 more adults who liked crafts to be the helpers. The mother led. The new volunteers helped with cutting and gluing, and our kids were surrounded by even more faith formation mentors than before. This experiment has been going on for 4 years now, and it continues to grow and change. 5 of the 6 can read and take turns leading the large group portions. One of the girls is in confirmation, and she enjoys leading the younger ones in the creative prayer practices that she is learning in confirmation. My oldest daughter attends church camp in the summer and has started leading the other children and the adults in the songs that she is learning there. Most of the kids no longer need a lap to sit on, but they have formed such positive relationships with the adults of the congregation that they don't hesitate to ask for help. And the congregation continues to learn how to engage children and youth in faith formation and to bring resources home for the little ones in their own lives. A few months back, we even had a dual language CDT when some members brought family from Denmark with 2 little girls. They simply made more craft copies of the leaflet, changed the craft to something they could do by family, and asked the mother to translate for her children. CDT is their ministry, led by their people, serving their children. A true asset indeed. Now take a few moments to consider these questions. In what creative ways can you connect your unexpected assets to the needs of your context? What is the Spirit up to? How is God leading and guiding the work? Once again, back to the Princess Bride. Our 3 friends have their combined brains, strength, and steel, and a wheelbarrow to storm the single castle gate guarded by 60 men. Against all odds, they only need one more thing to achieve their goal. The man in black says, "What I wouldn't give for a Holocaust cloak." Inigo deflates, wondering why such a strange thing would make any difference. Then, the giant produces a Holocaust cloak. The trio makes a very convincing and very scary appearance of the dread pirate Roberts. They storm the castle, rescue the princess, slaughter the 6-figured man, and ride off into the sunset. In rural and small church faith formation, finding that unexpected asset is, as my sister would say, the difference that makes the difference. In our context, this conversation about liabilities and assets came to a head at a Byron Sunday School teachers meeting in the fall of 2018. The conversation began with our disappointment over who wasn't in attendance, that we didn't have enough teachers to cover all of the classes on all of the Sundays. Then the conversation turned introspective. One of the teachers said, I just don't have the time and energy to teach Sunday school the way I think our children deserve. All of us leave it to the last minute and come reluctantly because we know it isn't going to go well. Our children and youth deserve better than what we are giving them. The rest of the group agreed, and I felt like we had finally gotten to the heart of the matter. Our leaders were burnt out, stressed out, and out of time. How could we sustain a vibrant Sunday school if this was all we had? And that's when I felt the Holy Spirit tapping on my shoulder. I had been trying to reach this group with faith formation resources for 5 years, and either the experiments failed or just didn't have enough traction to really get going. As part of my work in digital faith formation and in response to a stated need, I created a website, Faithful Parents, which I still think has some of the best resources that you can find for free on ways to be intentional in parenting in a faith-based way. No response. I went to their homes, couple by couple, and interviewed them about what exact resources they wanted. Out of this work came another website and accompanying Pinterest pages, Trisane's Parents. Last week, the page had 1 hit, and I'm pretty sure it was me checking to make sure the site was still there. We had tried a simpler version of Sunday school from the Episcopal Church that didn't require lugging books from place to place called lesson plans at work. It was too simple and required too much advanced preparation for them to do well. Up until this point, I was more than willing to help them out and work to reach them in any way possible. But it was this conversation that really helped us to finally turn the corner. As their pastor, I had just finished my certificate in 21st century faith formation with the Vibrant Faith Institute, and I was brimming with ideas of how to take what seemed like a lack of assets and turn it into a place where our volunteers, youth, and children not only weren't stressed or dreading Sunday school, but in fact, everyone looked forward to it with anticipation and joy. So I said, let's try an experiment. And Byron's monthly large group Sunday was born. Because it was an experiment, we would continue with traditional classroom age group Sunday school 2 to 3 Sundays per month, which seemed more reasonable given the number of teachers that we actually had. Try out large group Sunday once per month, and try another type of experiment on the remaining Sunday, which I will talk about later. The unexpected assets here were twofold. I would take on the physical prep work, which would give the adult volunteers more time to review their parts and less time stressing over details. And we would use our confirmation youth as peer mentors and station leaders, which would give them an important teaching role while still allowing them to participate in their own level. When I asked the teachers, what do you want them to learn? They responded with 3 categories: service, prayer, and experiential learning. We generally have 9 months in the program year, and so we rotate through these 3 categories 3 times. On service and prayer Sundays, which include stations with different service projects and creative prayer practices, we invite the rest of the congregation to become a part of the action, and they take us up on the invitation. On learning Sundays, we gather as a large group for a prayer, song, and story, and then split into small groups of mixed ages to dive deeper into the story, rotating through interactive learning stations. In the 1.5 years that we've been engaged in this experiment, we have seen increased attendance and participation on these Sundays. Our children look forward to engaging in faith formation in a more experiential way, and the adults who volunteer have become a regular crew of people who now specialize in helping on large group Sundays. I also have another adult leader who is willing and excited to lead these Sundays when I am not available, and I appreciate her enthusiasm, effort, and feedback as we continue to learn how to do this together. Back when I was talking to the Byron Sunday School teachers, we alleviated some of their time crunch by shifting curriculum development and resource preparation to me as a professional church leader in monthly large group Sundays. But I wanted to do more than just reduce the time it took them to prepare. What if I could truly give them the gift of time itself? At the time the traditional Sunday school as a practice developed, it was a needed educational time for children who might otherwise never learn to read or write. It was a gift that the church could give to the world at that time and place, a gift which many of our children now have free access to. I am more and more convinced that the gift that the church has to give the world in this time and place is the practice of Sabbath. Time off, time away, time to spend together, time to breathe. That's where our idea for Sabbath Sunday began. What if, Instead of having to get up early on yet another day of the week, fight with our kids about eating breakfast and getting dressed in nice clothes quickly so we could rush to church, what if one Sunday a month could be about waking up late, eating a hot breakfast in our jammies, and then intentionally attending church together at a worship service in which everyone of all ages and stages could participate? And what if the 16 Byron confirmation students and all 6 of the children and youth at St. Paul Hardy could be empowered to lead this worship service in a real and essential way, alleviating the stress on our church leaders for at least one Sunday per month? I remember that when I first floated this idea, one of the Sunday school teachers said, "Do you have time to do all of this for us?" I replied, "I will make time," and it has become the best use of my time each month. In order to pull this off, however, I had so much to learn, and I came to realize how much God had been preparing me along the way. Thanks to recommendations from colleagues, I had read the books The Art of Curating Worship by Mark Pearson and Parenting in the Pew by Robbie Castleman. I had attended Rethinking Worship and Rethinking Church at Luther Seminary and had been exposed to the idea of congregation-wide Sabbath by Cara Root, the creative prayer practices of Teresa Cho, and the biblical storytelling style of Heather Ross Johnson. Through the National Youth Gathering, I had learned about St. Lydia's and the work of Emily Scott with Dinner Church. And through my best friend was connected to Humble Walk Lutheran Church and Jody Hogue and their work among the de-churched. One of my mom's first cousins is a member of Grace Apple Valley, the first church to have a playground for children, and she invited me to attend. At the same time, I was receiving the rich gifts of the Certificate in 21st Century Faith Formation from Vivant Faith Institute, led by John Roberto, and as a corollary of my curating work in digital faith formation, was exposed to another community of my heart, Music That Makes Community, under the direction of Paul Vasili. At the time I was learning all of these things, I didn't know where they would lead. I felt that the Holy Spirit was nudging me to get this education, but I really didn't have an idea of where it would end up. I am fortunate that my husband is so supportive of these strangely overwhelming amorphous calls, and that he felt as patient as I did as to the end goal. I tried to attend to the Holy Spirit, and in the end, much of it came together in our Sabbath Sunday practice. In this time and place, when everything is changing so rapidly, I think it is essential that those of us who call ourselves teachers and faith formers have to be ourselves learners and seekers of deeper faith formation within our own lives. What do you have to learn? In what ways are you engaging in your own lifelong learning and faith formation? What have you been feeling nudged towards that you haven't yet taken the plunge over? Take a few moments to consider these questions. As all of my learning experiences started to finally point toward Sabbath Sunday, I had to go back to the basics of worship planning and decide what was absolutely essential, and how to present it in a format that would teach those who didn't know how to worship, while also making sure that those who had faithfully been in worship for 40, 60, 80 years or more would still be meaningfully engaged. We start with a simple call and echo song of welcome that everyone can participate in. Then, since the age of First Communion in my parish is 5th grade, we remember our baptism, which is our common sacramental heritage. We pray a simple prayer of the day in repeat after me fashion, which remains the same for the whole quarter. We also sing the same 3 hymns for every Sabbath Sunday in a quarter, concentrating on songs which our older folks know by heart and would like our younger folks to learn. A Mighty Fortress, Amazing Grace, It Is Well With My Soul. Our psalm for the quarter also remains the same, with a single response verse that all of us would do well to commit to memory. Bless the Lord, O my soul. The Lord is my refuge and strength. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Our children and youth lead special music, which we practice during CDT and confirmation class. Instead of a children's message, we do an interactive biblical storytelling time that I call Experience the Word. It gets our children and youth involved in the story, complete with lines and actions. I do a shortened oral sermon. We profess the Apostles' Creed and pray the Lord's Prayer with actions to embody the words. We pray for one another, wish each other peace, do simple call and echo songs for offering and sending. We bless and send one another and leave refreshed and ready to serve the Lord. And all of this is done with the leadership of our youth and children. Those who don't want speaking parts ring the singing bowl, pour water into the baptismal font, and serve as greeters, ushers, and acolytes. Those who do want to speak present the Bible readings and prayers of the people, lead the repeat after me prayers, and serve as cantors for our call and echo songs. All in all, I have a potential of 26 different essential parts available, and depending on who signs up to lead, those parts can be covered by as few as 6 or as many as 26. The children and youth are growing into this opportunity to lead. The parents are happy that they no longer have to drag their children to church, and our older adults are so pleased to have a full, vibrant sanctuary with everyone participating. A few stories about Sabbath Sunday to share. At first, this felt really rocky to me. It was not smooth or professional. There were a lot of anxieties on the part of the children and youth to manage. I went from being a worship leader to a stage manager of a worship experience. However, as we have settled into it, it has given me a tremendous amount of joy. The first time that I counted Sabbath Sunday as a success was during one of our Experience the Word times. The children and youth had helped me to tell the Bible story in an interactive way, and I could tell that they were really into it. Then, one of my young guys, who has always been reluctant to come up front for the children's message, and has never really seemed into worship at all, looked at me with a wide grin on his face and said, "Can we do that again, but switch parts?" I looked at the congregation, they nodded at me, and we did it again. This lovely young man now wanted more worship, not less, and the congregation was willing to participate in his joy. Another feeling of a shift in culture came when we decided to renew the Sabbath Sunday experiment this fall. We had gone from 12 confirmation students last year to 17 this year, and when I arrived for worship in Byron, 19 of the 17 had shown up, because 2 of the high schoolers who had been confirmed this previous spring wanted to help too. That being said, there have been times when we have had as few as 5 leaders, and one time when half of the group unexpectedly made it to the finals of the state track meet, and we had to pause the beginning of worship to reconfigure what we had planned. There was also a time when I wanted to cancel or reschedule because I was going to be out of town, and they led without me. One mother agreed to be the stage manager, I scheduled a preacher, and they took care of the rest. Over and over again, the parents tell me that the children and youth look forward to Sabbath Sunday and are willing to skip sleepovers and come to church in their basketball uniforms and bring Grandpa, who goes to another church, to our church to see them lead. My final story about Sabbath Sunday is what makes it all worth it to me. A few months ago, we had a younger child who wanted to start participating in Sabbath Sunday worship leadership. On his first Sunday, he was too short to reach the candles, to light them. So he and his grandpa came out together and served as acolytes together. Later in the service, he wanted to help with the prayers, but couldn't quite handle reading all of each petition. He and his mom split up the words, and sitting next to one another in a pew, sharing a tiny lapel mic, together as a family, they led us in prayer. Still brings tears to my eyes. As we conclude our time together, I feel like it is also time to give you a warning label. You have heard me refer to all of these projects as experiments, and that is intentional. Using the term experiment seems to make these shifts a lot less high stakes, both for me and the people I serve alongside. It also gives us permission to tweak or change or scrap pieces that aren't working. and to let certain projects come to natural conclusions without limping along for years past their effectiveness. And experiments fail. As I went back through all of the project proposals that I have had for the past 7 years, out of 12 or 15, these are the 3 that we could call successful. Some of them never made it off the project board. Some got as far as curriculum building and resourcing without a critical mass of people interested in engaging them. Some even grew out of a direct response to a clearly stated need and just didn't go. Those were the hardest ones for me to let go of. However, ask any scientist and they will tell you, experimentation is not just about a successful result, it is also about learning from the failures and trying again in a different way. I believe that if you are willing to continue learning, any experiment is worth the time and effort, the blood, sweat, and tears, the brains, strength, and steel. Also, you might go out and seek some learning in a particular area that you feel called to learn, and it just won't be directly applicable to your immediate ministry. When I have experiences like this, I have stopped thinking of them as a waste of time. Instead, I put them in my toolbox for another time and focus on the connections that I have made and the ways that this learning might be feeding me. We are more than just the programs we produce. And I truly believe that we are better faith formation leaders if we are continuing to be fed and formed, even if that takes us beyond what we might need at our technical work. For example, my parish is not really gifted in complicated vocal music, but it is something that I love. When I went to my first Music That Makes Community event, I found a group of truly gifted singers who could achieve amazing things without written music or instrumental accompaniment. This was absolutely not something that I could take back to Nebraska and expect to immediately apply with any kind of hope for success. So when I was asked, what are you going to take home from this masterclass? I answered, renewal and community. Singing with them fed me, musically and spiritually, and that in and of itself would make me a better pastor, leader, wife, mother, and friend. That being said, I have been able to apply these principles in my context, but I will continue to seek connection where I can experience the whole enchilada for myself. Since I am not the kind of person who would introduce a ton of new ideas and then refuse to share, I have created a web page with information related to all that I have talked about today. My hope and prayer is that this is the beginning of the conversation, and that you will reach out to me, to Lisa, and to your other faith formation colleagues as you journey along this holy work. When I told the Tri-Saints that I would be presenting this workshop to you, their immediate response was good. Tell them that we're still out here doing God's work. They may be small, but they are mighty, proud to be doing God's work with their hands, even at the ends of the earth. And I am blessed to serve alongside such generous, tenacious, open-hearted people. This is where I serve, and this is where I serve. This is where I serve, and this is where I serve. May God continue to reveal unexpected blessings to all of you in all of the specific places which you have been called to serve.